por mí. Aquí lo espero en Miraflores. No se tarde en llegar, cobarde.
Que si quieren conversar seriamente de un acuerdo de combate contra el narcotráfico, estamos listos.
It's 2 a.m. in Caracas, Venezuela. The city is asleep. The streets are empty. A tropical storm hangs over the Caribbean. Somewhere in the darkness, inside a fortress disguised as a home, a man is sleeping next to his wife. Steel doors, reinforced walls, a panic room with solid steel on all sides. He has spent 12 years building this security apparatus. He has survived assassination attempts, drone attacks, coup plots, and international sanctions. Just hours ago, he was singing on television, dancing at a Christmas party, smiling like nothing was wrong. But tonight, everything changes, because outside, helicopters are crossing into Venezuelan airspace. And here's the strange part: no one is shooting at them. The most powerful military in the Western Hemisphere is flying directly toward the president's compound, and not a single anti-aircraft missile is fired. Not a single fighter jet scrambles, not a single shot. Why? The answer to that question will change everything you think you know about this night. The man they're hunting controls the largest oil reserves on Earth. According to the United States government, he's the leader of one of the most powerful drug trafficking organizations in the Western Hemisphere. There's a $50 million bounty on his head. His name is Nicolás Maduro, and someone close to him has just sold him out. This is the story of the hunt for the most wanted man in the Americas. Nicolás Maduro was born on November 23, 1962, into a working-class family in Caracas. His father was a trade union leader. His childhood was unremarkable. He never finished high school. In 1986, at age 24, he traveled to Cuba for a year of ideological instruction. It was his only formal education after high school. When he returned to Venezuela, he got a job driving buses for the Caracas Metro. He was a salsa music fan, an avid baseball player. According to a diplomatic cable leaked by WikiLeaks, he even declined a contract offer from a Major League Baseball scout. But Maduro had bigger ambitions. He became a union leader, and by the 1990s, Venezuelan intelligence agencies had identified him as a leftist radical with close ties to the Cuban government. It was during this time that he met two people who would change his life forever. The first was Cilia Flores, a young lawyer who would become his partner for life. The second was a former army paratrooper who had just led a failed coup against the Venezuelan government. His name was Hugo Chávez. In 1992, Chávez launched a military coup. It failed. He was arrested and sent to prison. But Maduro saw something in this man, a leader, a revolutionary. Maduro and Cilia Flores visited Chávez in Heir prison. They campaigned for his release. They became his most loyal supporters. In 1994, Chávez received a presidential pardon. 4 years later, he was elected president of Venezuela, and the bus driver from Caracas began his meteoric rise. National Assembly member, president of the National Assembly, foreign minister, vice president. His adversaries mocked him. They called him a buffoon, a puppet, a glorified bus driver, but they underestimated him. In early 2012, Hugo Chávez was diagnosed with cancer. For months, the question hung over Venezuela: who would be his successor? There were many possible choices: powerful figures in the government, military leaders, political heavyweights. But on December 8, 2012, in what would be his last address to the nation, Chávez made his decision. He chose Nicolás Maduro. "If something happens to me," Chávez told the nation, "I ask you to vote for Nicolás Maduro."
Elijan a Nicolás Maduro como presidente de la República Bolivariana de Venezuela.
3 months later, Hugo Chávez died. Maduro inherited a nation built on oil wealth and Chávez's charismatic authority, but he lacked his mentor's magnetism. What he had was something else: the support of Cuba, the loyalty of the military, and a willingness to do whatever it took to stay in power. In April 2013, Maduro won his first presidential election by less than 2 percentage points. It would be the last close election he would ever allow. Shortly after taking office, Maduro married Cilia Flores. He called her the first combatant instead of first lady. She would become one of the most powerful figures in Venezuela, and according to US prosecutors, one of his partners in crime, because behind the scenes, something darker was taking shape. According to the United States Department of Justice, Maduro wasn't just running a country, he was running a cartel. The name comes from the sun insignias worn on the epaulettes of Venezuelan generals. El Cartel de los Soles, the Cartel of the Suns. What started as a network of corrupt military officers in the 1990s would grow into something far more powerful under Maduro's rule. According to US prosecutors, Maduro and his closest allies corrupted every institution in Venezuela, the military, the intelligence apparatus, the legislature, the judiciary, to move tons of cocaine into the United States. Their partners, the FARC, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia. The scheme was massive. Cocaine produced in Colombia, transported through Venezuela, shipped north by boat, by plane, through clandestine airstrips in the jungle. 200 to 250 tons of cocaine every year. And Maduro didn't just allow it to happen. He allegedly negotiated the shipments himself. He allegedly provided military-grade weapons to the FARC. The goal, prosecutors claimed, wasn't just money. It was to flood the United States with cocaine and use the drug as a weapon against America. For years, the evidence piled up. In 2013, French police seized 1.3 tons of cocaine on an Air France flight from Caracas, 31 suitcases, 28 people arrested. In 2016, US prosecutors indicted Venezuela's former anti-narcotics chief. The next day, Maduro promoted him to Interior Minister. It was a message to Washington: you can't touch us. But on March 26, 2020, the message changed. The US Department of Justice unsealed a federal indictment against Nicolás Maduro: narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation, possession of machine guns, $15 million reward for his arrest. This wasn't statecraft, it was a corrupt and violent narco-terrorism conspiracy. By 2024, Venezuela was in ruins. 7.7 million Venezuelans had fled the country, one of the largest migration crises in modern history. Hyperinflation had destroyed the economy. Shortages of food and medicine had become the norm. And yet Maduro remained in power. He had survived everything: sanctions, protests, an assassination attempt by drones in 2018, an uprising in 2019. But a new challenger had emerged. Her name was Maria Corina Machado. Charismatic, principled, uncompromising, wildly popular, so Maduro banned her from running. Eventually, the opposition united behind a former diplomat named Edmundo González. On July 28, 2024, Venezuelans went to the polls. The opposition was ready. 58,000 volunteer groups, poll watchers at every station. When the polls closed, they collected tally sheets from more than 80% of the voting machines. The numbers were clear. González had won with 67% of the vote. And then the government announced the results. Maduro had won with 51.95%. No evidence, no detailed counts. They blamed a cyber attack. One mathematician pointed out the results had oddly round percentages. They had been fabricated. Protests erupted. The government responded with force. 2,000 arrested, at least 25 killed, including 2 children. Machado went into hiding. González fled to Spain. But Maduro swore himself in for a third term on January 10, 2025. "I come from the people," he declared. "I am of the people." He believed he was untouchable. In January 2025, Donald Trump returned to the White House, and he had a plan for Venezuela. The administration moved fast. January. The reward for Maduro increased to $25 million. February, Tren de Aragua and the Sinaloa Cartel designated as foreign terrorist organizations. July, the Cartel of the Suns designated a global terrorist group. August, the reward doubled to $50 million, the highest bounty ever offered. Under President Trump's leadership, Maduro will not escape justice, declared Attorney General Pam Bondi. But the real pressure came from the sea. In November, the aircraft carrier USS Gerald R. Ford deployed to the Caribbean. More than 15,000 troops poured into the region. The USS Iwo Jima, the USS Gravely, the USS Jason Dunham, the USS Stockdale, an armada. But it wasn't just military pressure. The United States began seizing oil tankers. Venezuela's economy runs on oil. And suddenly, 40 tankers sat anchored off the coast, unable to move. The storage tanks on land were full. The refineries were backing up. Without buyers, without diluents, PDVSA was about to collapse. The regime was being strangled. And in the shadows, the CIA was at work. A small team had been on the ground since August. They had an asset close to Maduro, tracking his movements, studying his patterns. They built a detailed picture of his pattern of life, where he lived, how he moved, when he was most vulnerable. They knew he slept at Fuerte Tiuna, the largest military base in Venezuela. They knew the layout of his fortress, the steel doors, the panic room, and most importantly, they knew something else. Not everyone around Maduro was loyal. The trap was set. The operation was planned for 4 days earlier, but the weather wasn't perfect. Cloud cover was too heavy, so Trump waited. And then, on the night of January 2nd, 2026, the skies cleared. Go. At Mar-a-Lago, Trump watched a live feed of the operation. At 2 a.m. local time, the helicopters of the 161st Special Operations Aviation Regiment crossed into Venezuelan airspace. The Night Stalkers, the same unit that flew the raid that killed Osama bin Laden. Inside those helicopters, Delta Force, FBI agents with arrest warrants. Across Caracas, explosions lit up the sky. Fuerte Tiuna, La Carlota airfield, communications centers. Residents rushed into the streets, some recorded on their phones. Power went out across the city. And here is where the story gets strange. The helicopters flew low over Caracas. No resistance, the most heavily defended airspace in Venezuela. And not a single shot. No anti-aircraft fire, no missiles, no fighter jets, nothing. Delta Force landed at Maduro's compound. Steel doors, reinforced walls, the panic room he had spent years building. They had blowtorches ready to cut through, but they didn't need them. When they breached the doors, Maduro was still in bed. He tried to run. He tried to reach the safe room, but they moved too fast. He got bum-rushed so fast that he didn't make it, Trump would later say. Maduro and Cilia Flores were dragged from their bed, handcuffed, blindfolded. They surrendered without a fight. And here's what's important. In the entire operation, Delta Force encountered almost no resistance. As one analyst put it, they handed him over on a silver platter. The question is, who gave the order to stand down? At 4:21 a.m. Eastern Time, Trump posted on Truth Social. The United States of America has successfully carried out a large-scale strike against Venezuela and its leader, President Nicolás Maduro, who has been, along with his wife, captured and flown out of the country. Hours later, he posted a photograph. Maduro, blindfolded, handcuffed, grey sweatpants. Nicolás Maduro on board the USS Iwo Jima. Attorney General Pam Bondi announced the charges. Narco-terrorism conspiracy, cocaine importation, possession of machine guns. They will soon face the full wrath of American justice, on American soil, in American courts. But here's what's interesting. Look at who wasn't captured. Diosdado Cabello, the second most powerful man in Venezuela, still free. Vladimir Padrino Lopez, defense minister, the man who controls the military, still free. Jorge Rodriguez, President of the National Assembly, still free. Delcy Rodriguez, Vice President, still free. Every single top leader of the regime, except Maduro, remained untouched. And within hours, Marco Rubio told Senator Mike Lee that there would be no more attacks. The New York Times had reported weeks earlier that Delcy Rodriguez was at the center of secret negotiations with Washington, a possible change of leadership. The opposition immediately pointed to a deal. Think about it. The most protected man in Venezuela, captured without a fight. His entire inner circle, untouched. No further attacks planned. Was this a military operation? Or was this a transaction? Did the regime sell Maduro to save themselves? In Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez went on state television. We do not know the whereabouts of President Nicolás Maduro and First Lady Cilia Flores. We demand immediate proof of life.
La inmediata liberación del presidente Nicolás Maduro, único presidente de Venezuela.
The government declared a state of emergency. Vladimir Padrino vowed that Venezuela would resist. But resist what? The Americans had already left, and they had taken only one thing with them: Maduro. Under Venezuelan law, if the president is permanently absent, the vice president takes power. That's Delcy Rodriguez, the same woman the New York Times linked to secret negotiations with Washington. And if elections are called, the National Assembly must declare the absence permanent. That's controlled by Jorge Rodriguez, her brother. Meanwhile, the oil tankers still sit off the coast. The economy is still strangled. The only way out is a deal with Washington. And now, the one person Washington refused to deal with is gone. Maria Corina Machado, the opposition leader, published a statement from exile. What had to happen is happening. But Trump poured cold water on her too. I don't think she has the support, he said. So who will lead Venezuela? The opposition that won the election, or the regime that sold its own leader? That question remains unanswered. It happened exactly 36 years to the day after another operation. On January 3rd, 1990, Manuel Noriega, the dictator of Panama, surrendered to American forces. He was flown to Miami, tried for drug trafficking, and sentenced to 40 years in prison. 36 years later, another Latin American leader accused of drug trafficking was in American custody. The parallels are unmistakable, but there's one key difference. When the Americans came for Noriega, his military fought back. Thousands died. When the Americans came for Maduro, no one fired a shot. Nicolás Maduro started as a bus driver, a union organizer, a believer in a revolution. He rose to become the heir of Hugo Chávez, the president of a nation with the largest oil reserves on earth. But in the end, he was betrayed by the same people he trusted, sold for a deal with Washington, traded for the survival of the regime. Whether the narco-terrorism charges will hold up in court remains to be seen. What is certain is that 12 years of authoritarian rule ended in a single night, that a man who believed he was untouchable was dragged from his bed, that the fortress he built to protect himself became his prison, and that the people who were supposed to defend him opened the door. For the 7.7 million Venezuelans who fled their country, this is a moment of hope. For Maria Corina Machado, Edmundo González, and the opposition, this is vindication. For the families of the protesters killed, the political prisoners still behind bars, the journalists silenced, this is the beginning of accountability. And for Nicolás Maduro, the bus driver who became a president who became a prisoner, the hunt is over, but the real question is just beginning. Who sold him out, and what did they get in return?